Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I'm your host, Ben Cross, and I have my friend today, Will Keating from Carrier Corporation on with us. We're going to talk about his really exciting journey, and so I hope you guys all tune in and ask lots of questions. This is your opportunity. You ask Will whatever you want. Just throw those in the comments and I will put those up. So if you're joining us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, come on in, hit that like button, hit that heart button. Let's go ahead and really quickly talk also about this book right here, Lead Like an Ally. It is not too late to get this on your Kindle or even order it on Amazon. It's a quick read. It's only like 100 pages. Julie Kratz is the author, Lead Like an Ally. It's about allyship in the workplace for you men and women out there. Should read this book, and it kind of tells us how to be better allies to women. And I guess you could really say anybody in the workplace. So looking forward to having a conversation on Monday about this. So if you've read this book and you want to be on Monday and talk about it, love to have you. Still penciling in guests for that. And then we have the author on Tuesday. So we're doing like kind of a virtual book club thing, kind of like we did with the Go Giver with Bob Berg. So I'm just going to put this back here like that. There we go. And let's go ahead and thank our sponsor also as part of our Move for Hunger telethon that we did. Our sponsor today is VIP Corporate Housing, is the partner you can trust to put the safety and security of your employees front and center of everything they do. In addition to providing some of the best accommodations in top locations, they've added extra cleaning measures and precautions to put your mind at ease so you can leave the worrying to them and you can focus on doing your best work. Thank you so much to VIP Corporate Housing. Appreciate you. And let's go ahead and bring Will Keating on. Will's backstage in the green room eating all the M&Ms. Hey, Will, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, good afternoon, sir. Nice to see you virtually again.
I know, man. I haven't seen you since I think we were sharing a going away beer at Witch's Hat Brewing Company in South Lyon.
Yep, that must have been June of last year when I left the great state of Michigan.
Dude, it's too long. So now tell everybody where you're at now.
Yep, now I'm with Carrier Corporation in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. So that's South Florida, West Palm Beach area for those that are not familiar with it. So although I loved Michigan, the 6 or 7 months of winter was a bit much for me. And I grew up in Southern California, so I had to get to a warmer climate, which was one of the main reasons for moving on, amongst others.
Yeah. So you moved from Michigan to Florida. That must have been a tough sell in your household, huh?
Not really. We did like Michigan. As you know, my wife is from Japan, and my first son was born there, and that's kind of where I got my mobility start, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So we did enjoy Michigan because it had a large Japanese population with all the auto suppliers and Toyota and those guys there. And for that reason, they had a Japanese school, which my son was going to. Even at the local Kroger, that allowed a Japanese product. So although we did like it there, weather is extremely important to my family. Because I have a 3 and 6-year-old, and just being cooped up inside the house 6 months out of the year just wasn't working. So we eventually wanted to get somewhere warmer. The timeline was more like 5 years down the road. It ended up being 3 years in Michigan total. We had just built a new house there. We lived in it for 2 years.
Yeah, great house too, right down the street from me.
Yep. So it's kind of sad to go through the pain and angst of building a new house and having a house that you love everything about to pick up and move after just 2 years. But adventure is part of our family's motto.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the fact that, like you say, adventure is part of your family's motto. I mean, I feel the same. I mean, I don't think my adventures are as crazy as yours, but I mean, me and my wife have moved probably, if you count senior year of college, living together, we probably moved 13, 14 times. So, it's kind of interesting, the dynamic that being mobile can have on your family and having all these kind of varied experiences. And people talk about third culture kids and all sorts of stuff like that. How's the family acclimating to Florida, to being Floridians?
They're good. They love it. We can't ask for a better place to be during lockdown, right? Because we have beautiful weather. We have a pool in the backyard for the kids. So they go swimming every day. We never had them do swim lessons or anything, but at ages 6 and 3, they can swim perfectly. Even the 3-year-old was able to master swimming on his own before he even turned 3. So that was a great, that's a great activity for them. We can go ride our bikes,
Yeah.
I don't play golf, but we live on a golf course, so it's kind of pretty to look at. And
Same.
Watch all the retirees golf all day. And when I'm driving to work in the morning, they're on their second mimosa or what have you.
Dude, you got to get a golf cart. The kids will love it, man. You got to get the golf cart.
Yep.
It's great for driving around, having a couple pops.
Yep.
See people coming in on LinkedIn. That's awesome. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, whatever, we're streaming live on all 3 channels right now. Go ahead and hit the heart, hit the Love and Relo heart. It's kind of been our signature. Also give Will a round of applause here with the applause button. Let him know that you love him and you appreciate him. Let's see who's checking in here before we get this show on the road. Also, by the way, you got Will here. He ain't going nowhere. Ask him some questions, okay? He's got a crazy story. He's going to tell you all about his life story. It's really interesting. It's fascinating. I love hearing about it. I learn something new every time I talk to him. So if you got questions about Japan, if you got questions about the corporate mobility side, I mean, if you whatever, career stuff, I mean, all that stuff, I think Will's super, super strong in. Let's go ahead and see what people are talking about over here. Francine Drusty says, hi, Ben from St. Louis. Just got the book. Awesome, Francine. Let me know how you like it. I'd love to hear any feedback, early chapters, whatever. Definitely have to look at having you on maybe Monday. Hit me up if you're interested. Lynn Greenberg, hi, Ben and Will. Lynn from Pivot App in New York. What up, Lynn? And Knapp, hi, Ben and Brian. Greetings from Scottsdale. He goes by Brian. He looks like a Brian. I see it. I don't. I think she meant Bill, maybe? Oh, wait.
Or Brian. I think there's a Brian Keating from Dwarfs.
There is a Brian Keating. Actually, the winner of Global Mobility Jeopardy Week 1 was Brian Keating.
Okay. Yeah, I ran into him at a Relo conference, and not that that Keating is an uncommon name, but I just haven't ran into many people with the same last name. But I remember running into him and chatting with him. And WellWorks has always been a company that I was kind of interested in, thought had an interesting story and good leadership that's grown over the years. So I always enjoy talking to those folks.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so she corrected that. That's funny. Don't you love when you I'd be like autocorrect. I don't know what happened. Jamie Master, hi, Ben and Will. Cheers from sunny South Haven, Mississippi. Hey, Jamie. John Case, good afternoon. John Case, Quality, moving Long Island. I love the fact that these LinkedIn comments are coming in here and I could put them on the screen. This hi all is from Sandra Clary. I don't know why Sandra's doesn't show up there, but I'll give her a shout out anyway. I've gotten to know Sandra through Love and Relo, and it's been really cool. Jane Wilson, former guest. Hi, Ben and Will. Jane from Double Oak, Texas. Howdy, Jane. Out there in Dallas. And Will, did you ever live in Dallas?
I did not. So when I was in Michigan, as you know, I worked for General Motors Financial. Overall parent company is, of course, General Motors, but the finance business, our headquarters was in Fort Worth, Texas. So I would travel there on a quarterly basis. Love Texas, and that was when, on the grand scheme of things, when we're looking at getting somewhere south and warm, Texas was definitely high up on the list. I think Florida was definitely our number one, but there's not a whole lot of mobility, roles here. So even though it was like a place we wanted to go, we thought maybe a more logical change would be Texas, just because there's a big mobility job force there.
I got to be honest. Well, you're right. I mean, when you mentioned that, right, not a lot of mobility jobs in Florida. I mean, you're correct, and people from SRRC, are probably like rolling their eyes at me. But no, I mean, there's not a ton of, especially on the corporate side, mobility jobs in Florida. It's like really a needle in a haystack assignment. How do you, for the people out there, and Jana Masick and I just got done doing a webinar at noon called Networking Lunch, and we do it. This is our second Wednesday doing it. We got one more next week. But for people in transition who are looking to kind of call their shot and say, hey, I want to live here and I want to do this. I mean, you did that. I mean, how does somebody go about, I'm kind of jumping to the end of your story, but how do you go about calling your shot like that and saying, I want to be here, I want to be doing this? What types of building blocks or activities or things should people be doing?
Well, I think, in the beginning, you need to have a goal and plan. And, I think speaking from a U.S. perspective, a lot of people are just used to being born in a town and growing up in a town and going to school there and getting a job there. And they don't really think of moving to a different state, let alone a different country. So whatever your plan is, have your end game and work towards that. It may not happen tonight, tomorrow, or the next day, but really know what is important to you and your family and your goals, whether it's, a climate, a location, a international experience, your career path, whatever, get your plan in place and work towards that. And, as you are very good at, continue working on your brand and building your knowledge and, work towards where you want to be in the future, not where you are now. And, I think one example of that is, I got my start working on the service provider side. I started a DSP in Japan, and I did that for about 13 years. And just one day, I came home and I talked to my wife, and I just said, "Hey, I don't really like my job anymore, and I want to do something different." And my wife was like, "Cool, I don't really like your job anymore anyway."
She's like, "I don't like your job either, and frankly, I don't like you that much." No, I'm just kidding.
Because in Japan, I'd go in the office not too early, like 8 a.m., but we'd get home 10, 11 o'clock at night. So once we had our son, when you have a newborn, that means you never see your son. So at that point, we just decided to, my wife wasn't working, so I quit my job and essentially just figured it out. And I really had wanted to move to the corporate side of relocation and mobility. And so I had to put a plan together and how to make that happen, because I had some very good experience living abroad, running this business abroad. But that doesn't mean necessarily that it's exactly what you'd be doing from the corporate side. Right. I had to take my story and relate it to the corporate side and sell potential employers on what I had to offer. And that's part of the overall plan and, what you need to work on.
So I want to back up here because you're like, first of all, you're a Cali boy. How do you even end up in Japan?
Yep. So I guess we go back, early influences, as we all have. I like to joke and say that my family were expats before expats were cool. My family moved from Ireland to India in the late 1800s. And so my grandfather was actually born in India, of Irish descent. And so when I was growing up, I had all these cool pictures of my family in India, on safaris in Egypt. And that really influenced me growing up, this whole international lifestyle. And then also growing up in Long Beach, California, it truly is a melting pot. There's a whole lot of history there. There's a huge Cambodian population, Filipino population. Obviously, you have the border with Mexico, so a lot of people from Mexico, but there's just everybody from everywhere that has a story. And I always thought that was super interesting. So when I got to college, I knew that I wanted to do something with business and something maybe international. I just didn't know what, right? So I was working at United Airlines full-time, going to school full-time, and I had the opportunity to essentially travel the world, usually first class, for free. But as a starving student, when I got there, I didn't have a whole lot of money. So I was kind of slumming it, living in, hostels and that.
Right.
So as part of that journey, I had went to Europe and again, visited family and stuff. And that wasn't new territory for me. But going to Asia was very new to me. And so I first went to Hong Kong with a buddy of mine that was working at United Airlines with me. And then he got engaged to a Japanese lady, in which we went to Japan together just for a 2-3 week vacation. And I think the primary interest at that point was to go to a car show in Tokyo, aftermarket car show there. If there's any car buffs out there, the Tokyo Auto Salon is kind of the pinnacle of all aftermarket car shows. It's kind of like more of a custom version of like the SEMA show.
So you were in that import tuner scene in the LBC, huh?
Yep. So originally went for that, and I was finishing up college, and I went back. I went to Cal State Long Beach, and I went back to my international center there, and I just said, "Hey, I just got back from Japan, and do you have any sort of program there?" And they said, yep, here's this program. It's a government program. And then they said, oh, wait, you missed the deadline. Give me that back. Another one we have is the
So
Sister
here's
City
your hope
program.
and dreams. Wait, psych, I want that back.
Yep. And then so they said, here's this other program. It's a sister city program between Long Beach, California, and a small city in Japan outside of Nagoya. And I applied for that program. It was the only program I applied for. And a few weeks went by after the interview. They called me up and said, congratulations, you didn't get the job.
Congratulations.
And I said, okay, well, great. I just kind of went on my business, continue studying to graduate. And they called me back and said, hey, somebody pulled out. Do you still want to go? I said, sure. And so I went there as part of this international program to help internationalize the city. It was supposed to be a 2-year, you go there, come back type of thing. And that turned into 13 years.
Wow. How did it go from, so tell me about that, and everybody that's watching this right now, because I'm finding this fascinating, and I love the way you're telling this story too. Hit that applause button out there if you're watching this, hit that like button. I want to see that here in the comments. Also, if you got any questions about Will's story, because I think it's fascinating. We're just like scratching the surface right now. Leave those in the comments. I see some coming in. We're going to get to all those. Brian, Rob, I see all those. So you were there for 2 years, and then all of a sudden the 2 years turns into 13. What happened?
Yep. So at the 2-year mark, and I was working for essentially a government entity there. So I was based in a city hall, like as traditional old school Japanese as you can get. Nobody speaks a lick of English. Imagine to like working in the government in the U.S. Right. So I was thrown into that as a great cultural experience. But at the same time, I wanted to kind of work on the more business side of things in Japan. So I just started looking out for different roles, and I think the story of my kind of journey is that things just kind of turn out for the better a lot of times. And so I was interviewing for different roles there, and I got involved with a very small, I call it a real estate company there, but it wasn't really a real estate company because they didn't have a real estate license, but it was really a business that was spawned from another series of kind of food service businesses in this city. And so they kind of got into the real estate introduction business. And so that's kind of when I got involved, and I was employee number 2. And my job was, like a lot of people probably in the audience, was sales and business development, and growing this company from essentially 2 people, 1 person fully dedicated to it, to kind of figure the path forward. And I think that was very interesting because I got just a good background of all kinds of experience, whether it's running a business, running the P&L, business development, sales, relo, and even developing all of those businesses. So, like I said, when I started, it was just a very tiny business. And our focus was introducing people to real estate in the local market. And one day I was riding the subway to work, and I saw an advertisement that said IT Expo 2005. That's the World Exposition. I think they do them every 4 years or some sort of cadence like that. The big one was coming in the next year to the city that I was located. So I was just kind of scratching my head. I'm like, well, probably a lot of foreign people are going to be coming for this expo.
Right.
And, it's a much better market than what we were into at the time. And so I put a plan together of, how we're going to tackle that. I made a connection with essentially a retired Toyota executive that was on loan to the World Exposition to set it up. And I had a 20-minute meeting with him. He introduced me to the CFO of the U.S. pavilion for the expo there. And I somehow convinced this rather dapper gentleman from Washington, D.C., whose office overlooked the White House, that he would go with our company to provide full relocation, housing, furniture lease for their people. We're talking about 30 managers. The head person was appointed by the President of the United States, and then about 50 college kids, all from Michigan, that worked actually in the pavilions. And that was a great learn because I had it was just me, I had no products. We didn't have a furniture lease business. We didn't have a real estate license. We didn't have relocation services. So I had to get him to trust in me, to deliver those services, and obviously, create the facade that we could make it happen.
That's incredible though, because you just described it like you didn't have anything other than this guy believed in you. We had Jack Jampel on, what was it, last week or so, and he talks about the differentiator is you, and all the trucks being the same and all the features and benefits being the same and everything being the same. Somebody has to believe in you, and frankly, that's all you had. It seems like, but it's funny because you're talking about your story and you're saying like, things just seem to work out. Things just seem to work out. But in retrospect, as you look back, I mean, did you think that it was like certain types of behaviors or things that you did that made you more susceptible to things just working out?
Yeah, you definitely can't just sit back on the couch and watch TV all day and expect for great things to happen, of course, right? So, I don't want to underplay, effort and hard work and making connections. And, the more people you meet, the more opportunities that present themselves. And, if you're, sometimes if you're doing sales or business development, doors are going to be closed or, whatever, but you just have to overcome adversity and just keep kind of chugging. And, I look at kind of my style is I make connections and friends forever. And I genuinely like people. I like talking about their hobbies and, their family or whatever. And if I look at my days in Japan, going back, it's probably when I started there 18 years ago. A lot of my good friends today are people that I met there. There's people in the industry that I met, from the relocation industry there that are still friends. Where I landed in Michigan, if I look at the people that our company helped relocate to Japan, the biggest groups from the United States were from Michigan or Texas, because we worked a lot with the automotive and the aerospace defense industries. And so even when we moved to Michigan, I ran into people that I met in Japan like all the time. And, even I lived in the same subdivision of a great friend that I met 15 years ago, and I helped his family relocate twice to Japan.
Yeah, that was crazy. I'm just going to share Will and I, we lived pretty close together, and actually Will and I, if you remember, it was Jason Miller from Quicken who connected us, I think. Right.
Yeah.
And Jason's like, yeah, I know this guy Will, and he's at GM Financial. He's in Relo also, and he has a poker game sometimes, and sometimes we play cards. And I'm like, yeah, I play cards. He's like, he actually lives out by you in South Lyon, or I don't know if you lived in Novi technically or South Lyon, but anyway, I'm like, that's right by me, like literally a hop, skip, and a jump away, not literally because I don't skip, but it was right down the street. And I went over there, and it was crazy because it was like to me, it was like a reunion of all like your boys from back in like back in Japan, and like their wives, and like they got married and stuff. And like it was crazy that y'all had known each other for 15 years and had lived together or in proximity to one another like then. And then flash forward, and here, everybody's all kind of grown up, has got families and whatnot. I just found that like crazy to me, I don't know.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to, like you said, that's what has made me successful, is that that's my approach, is I make friends and connections forever, and it's not just for the sake of getting a sale or whatever. And that poker party was actually started in Japan. So the guy I think you met at my party named Richard, who was my client in Japan, he started that poker party 15 years ago in Japan. He used to host it, and when he came back, when he relocated back to Michigan, I kind of took that over in Japan, and new crews kind of cycled in and that sort of thing. But I carried it over from him, and then when I moved back to the U.S. and landed in Michigan, I essentially rekindled that. And all those people that I knew from Japan, they all lived within 20 minutes of where I was living there in Novi, because they all worked for essentially automotive and automotive suppliers. And one guy literally lived a 3-minute walk down the street from me. So that is mobility. This, you run into people all the time that you've known from certain point in your life, and people get recycled over time. You don't see them for a while, and then you're reconnected. And I've just seen that everywhere in everything I do.
I feel like this show is kind of like that too, because it shrinks the world. Because like we had, Stefan from Luxembourg on, we had Victoria from Berlin on, and Stefan had worked with Debbie Convery over in Luxembourg in like a prior life. She's at Nike over on the West Coast, and it's like, and like things like this where people come on, chat, leave comments, network with each other, develop kind of relationships, and like you feel like these people because you see them all the time in the chat, and it's just really cool. Hey, speaking of those people, I want to get to some of these comments and questions over here. Give some shout outs to some people. Hosea Botley from Aversal. Good afternoon, guys from Seattle. Hey, Hosea. Jennifer Anderson. Hi, Ben and Will checking in from Claim Shield on Long Island. What's up, Jennifer? Brian Limperpolos. Brian, we got to talk about your last name, man. I got to get it right before you're on. You're coming on Thursday, and I got to figure out your name. No, Brian's a fantastic guy. He's going to be on Thursday, vice president over at International Association of Movers. Let's see here. Laura, hi, Ben and Will. Laura from New York. We're in New York, Laura, from White Plains. Let's see here. LinkedIn user. Who's that? Let's see. Oh, Sandra again. I grew up in the desert of Southern California, Imperial Valley, so I understand. When I moved to DC, I didn't own an umbrella nor a winter coat.
Actually, I use that line all the time, right? So I always say when I moved to Japan, I bought my first umbrella and my first jacket that wasn't for snowboarding. So I love that line. I use it all the time myself. Great one. True story.
That's crazy. See, people are talking to each other. It's so funny. People get on here and they start talking to each other. Jamie Massler, don't blame me, Will. Nice and sunny here too. Don't miss Jamie. JV's always recruit people to Mississippi. Such a great guy. Don't miss the PA or New York winters. Janet has a question, actually. Janet Turner, did you find a Japanese school for your son in Florida? If not, are you missing that?
So going back to Michigan, we just had because with all the Japanese expats there, it was part of the public school system. So it was, tax funded school that we didn't have to pay for. That was great there. And it's the only one of its kind in the United States. All the other schools in Japan or in the US, the Japanese schools are generally Saturday schools. So generally with Japanese expats, their kids will go to normal schools during the week, and then they'll go into a Saturday school that's kind of an immersion type program. And it's not language learning; you're actually learning the subjects in Japanese based on the Japanese curriculum. I think Korean schools have a very similar kind of program in a lot of cities, but from a Florida perspective, there are two. There's one in Miami and there's one in Orlando. So we have scoped those out. The plan is, depending on how things go with COVID and school going back to session, we would look at sending my oldest one there next year. From April is when the school year would start for a Japanese school.
Awesome. Your kids are so adorable too, by the way.
Thank you.
Vinny says, cheers from rainy Portland, Oregon. Vinny will be on the show next week. I want to say it's Wednesday or Thursday. It might be Thursday. He is trying to set a record, so mark your calendars for viewership there. Amber Gibson watching from Dallas. Howdy, Will and Ben. Howdy, Amber. Let's see here. Janie Coleman Williamson. Hi, Ben from AHI Corporate Housing and the ATL. All these acronyms. Mobility is so rife with acronyms. It's so funny. Amanda Zielinski. Hi. There is. Okay. I always forget the questions I ask. Mary Beth Ryan. Hey, Ben and Will. Hey, Mary Beth. Amber Gibson. See, they're talking to each other again. I love it. Mena from Dubai. Hey, Mena. It's good to see you. All right. Janet's got a question comment. Janet says, will you need to join our SRRC, Southern Regional Relocation Council? I'm on the board. I'll share info with you.
Thank you. And I think I've been in contact with folks from the organization.
Awesome. Rob Mazel here. Hello from New York, Ben Cross and William Keating. Awesome. Let's see. Jane Woolston, talking to Amber. Nice. Brian from IAM says, From Mr. Keating's perspective, okay, now put on your serious pants here. Well, from Mr. Keating's perspective, what one transformative technology could the industry develop or provide to make the relocation process smoother? So this is interesting. You've been on the service provider side. You've been on the corporate side, worn several hats over there. What one transformative technology could the industry develop or provide to make the relocation process smoother, in your opinion?
Yeah, and I think this one is like everybody can kind of relate to, but at the same time, not an easy one to do. Hence why it still isn't perfect. But as we know, in mobility, there are just so many people involved, right? From the company sending the person to the RMC, tax provider, household goods, DSP, etc. But what I've seen on both sides, of the industry is that there's just always a disconnect where like information does not flow seamlessly. Like there's always gaps, and like so the DSP. What I found when I was in Japan, the DSP that needs all this information, family size and ages of kids, and all these sort of things to do their job. By the time it went from company RMC, 35 companies in the middle, then I would be left with not a whole lot, and then I would have to go back to the assignees, like many on the podcast today have to do, is go back and ask them for questions or for information, and they say, hey, well, I've already given my passport 65 times. Why don't you just ask the company or whatever? Why do I have to do it so many times, right? And so if somebody could come up with a magic bullet to solve that problem, then they're going to make a lot of money, and they're going to make the relocation process a heck of a lot smoother.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that, and we talk about that a lot, right? I mean, APIs, EDIs, one ecosystem, and everybody says they have an API. And so this is the funniest thing too. This is the biggest problem that everybody says they have an answer to. Everybody you talk to says, "Oh, we have APIs. Oh, yeah, yeah, we do that. We have APIs." And the funny thing is, none of them. They develop the API, but nobody spends the time and money and resources to integrate them and map them and do the hard work. The easy work is developing the API. Say check, and then they'll say, "Oh, I'll send you my documentation. Figure it out." But like, nobody actually sits down and does the hard, ongoing work and process improvement work, project management work of actually integrating these things so that they actually work, and then testing them and trying to break them and then testing them again. It's so rare. And even companies that will say, hey, we offer a system where a user can go in and everything they want is in one place on this portal. But you know what? There's a million service providers, or 35 in your terms, in the background, manually running around like their hair's on fire, trying to upload this information as fast as the internet or the cloud would have it, and filling out spreadsheets and passing emails back and forth to give this illusion of this platform working, when in fact it's just smoke and mirrors. So, I think you raise an excellent point. We all have to sit down, and I think, and to Brian, then I'm going to put this back on you, Brian. I think it's incumbent almost to some degree on the associations because of how big and fragmented the industry is. I mean, there's 50 RMCs, there's thousands of moving companies, there's hundreds and perhaps thousands of DSPs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we almost need to put it back, the standards and practices back with the associations to champion these things, because there's just too many permutations of how we all connect to really get it all figured out. That's just my statement.
Yeah, and I'd say just from an industry perspective, I think we have a long ways to go with technology. And I think if you look at, the evolution of the business, and a lot of, whether it's, DSPs or household goods or whatever. So a lot of these businesses started from just very small businesses, very small local individuals that had an idea and know-how and did it. And then they've grown over time, but sometimes they've grown out of capacity where they're doing the best they can, but they don't have, the know-how or ability to go to the next level from the technology standpoint. And so we see that a lot in our industry. And one would think that, well, the bigger companies would have better technology. And I worked with all of the big RMCs, and I still haven't seen a great product out there from an IT perspective. But again, it could be the same from from in another industry as well, right? I look at banking. I remember the bank I used to bank with, one of the largest ones out there, if not the largest, and their app was just like old school, frustrating, not integrated. I'm just like, well, here's this company with endless resources, and their technology is so far behind these other three bank apps that I use. But it's not to pick on our industry. It's a struggle that a lot of industries deal with. You try to grow and do the best you can, but sometimes technology takes a back burner. So I think
and that's right. It's a back burner. It's not innovation is not a resource issue. It's more often a culture issue, is what I found. A culture of priorities, a culture of how much do we, how aggressively do we innovate, and how comfortable are we as management. We have a little side chatter here between Laura and Francine, passing notes back and forth about cannolis, which actually leads me to a very good question, as cannolis are near and dear to my heart, maybe in a bad way. But Will, your wife is a phenomenal baker. What is your favorite thing that she bakes?
Oh man, it's hard to choose just one, but I think you've sampled some of the goods at the poker parties. But she makes a like a Japanese style cheesecake, like Oreo cheesecake, which is phenomenal. Ask anybody that's had it, they all rave about it. But other favorites include creme brulee, tiramisu. She even makes cream puffs from scratch. You name it. So.
Oh my gosh, everything you named is fantastic.
Yeah, and my kids, even at ages 3 and 6, they're literally like little gourmets. Like they eat everything. They eat Thai food, they eat Japanese, they eat Chinese, Italian. If I ask my 3-year-old his favorite food, it's shrimp.
Man, let's see here. Molly Feldman from Jax checking in. Jason Rollins, hi, Ben and Will. It's a beautiful day in Foxborough, Mass. How are you guys dealing with Tom Brady's departure in Foxborough? Anyway, Francine Dresty, hi, Rob Maisel.
That is one of the downsides of living in Florida, though. I'm a diehard Chiefs fan, which we obviously had a good run last year, but basically everybody in Southern Florida is a Patriots fan. And so our local kind of dive bar here is called Duffy's. They're all over the place here. And if you go up there on like a Sunday when the Patriots are playing, you would think, it's a Patriots home game, because like everybody's in Brady jerseys. And like I walked down the street, one of the ladies, her dog's name is Tom Brady.
Her dog's name is Tom Brady.
I joked and asked her if the dog lets the air out of the balls that he plays. That didn't go well.
I love it. Making friends already. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Let's see here. Rob Maisel says, Will Keating, he's lived and worked in Japan as well. I've also experienced the long hours that are typically worked there. Did you notice any or many of your colleagues struggling from the effects of this?
Absolutely. So, when I finished up there, I had a staff of about 35 people in 3 cities, and it was, I would say, predominantly, I'd say 75% of the staff were Japanese and 25% were foreigners. Basically with the Japanese, they're kind of used to that. It's really the lifestyle there. It's just there's a saying in Japanese is gaman, which just means suck it up and deal with it. And so people in the U.S., we complain, we make a big deal about it, we sue people, all that good stuff. But Japanese people, they tend to just gaman and just suck it up and deal with it, and they let it build inside. And that creates obviously other problems and stuff like that. So I think that was always, a challenge for our Japanese staff, because, all this pressure would build up. The relocation industry is a bit stressful. We're a DSP there with all these people moving and needing everything to go right. So it equated to long hours. And so a challenge I always had there was retaining staff, right? People would just get burnt out and leave. And so that would be our Japanese staff. And then also our foreign or international staff, same sort of thing is, they would do it for a while. It's interesting. We all love the industry, but really you suffer from burnout. right? And I guess my tolerance lasted longer than others. I must be a glutton for punishment because I lasted 13 years doing that. But sometimes it takes a change in your life to have a different perspective. So I was single there, chasing my dreams and trying to make big money and all that sort of thing. And it really took me getting married and then, having my first son to kind of step back and say, hey, that was cool back then, but, this isn't really the lifestyle that we want. And,
Right.
so, you just need to make that call as if, you're burnt out or whatever. You need to know what's right for you. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, put plans in place to move to the life that you want.
Stefan checking in here. Janet asks, do you speak Japanese every day at home?
So really my Japanese is getting worse and worse by the minute. So I don't have a lot of opportunity to speak Japanese. So we have a rule in the household. If there's other kind of bilingual, trilingual, multilingual households out there, one trick we learned we went to a kind of seminar when we were going to the Japanese school in Michigan is that if you speak multiple languages in the house, you have to really come up with rules in the house and when to speak what language. And so that way the kids can kind of compartmentalize the language so they don't get confused, because our kids were always jumbling the language.
Oh, right, because they're using they're speaking Japanese and English intermittently, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the rule we came up with is mom always speaks to them in Japanese. They always speak to her in Japanese, and always speak them in English. And so that's how it's played out. And so for that reason, I don't really speak much Japanese or have the opportunity to speak much Japanese these days. I still understand it, that sort of thing, but just not a whole lot of practical opportunity.
Sure. Drew, shout out to all the Michiganders with the flooding right now. Francine, what a way to keep people connected to the poker game. I love it. That's awesome. Vinny will definitely have a record trial. I don't know, Jason, what you gonna do about it? Gotta get them out, man. Let's see here. I had to get the Philly cheesesteaks first. Next are the cannolis from New York City. Oh gosh, I love it. I love everybody just chatting away. Janet, again, because Janet spent some time in Japan. Actually, she worked for a Japanese company for 5 years. Gotcha. And she said, since you like poker, did you play pachinko in Japan? I hit the jackpot once, and they took me down a side alley to collect my winnings.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So for those that do not know what pachinko is, so essentially it's a kind of a pinball type game. And so gambling is technically illegal in Japan. So this is a way they've kind of stepped aside the law and kind of created this facade so it's actually legal. And so it's a game of skill, because what you do is you give cash, and you get essentially these little ball bearings. You get these buckets of ball bearings, and you feed these into these vertical pinball machines, and you turn a little knob, try to get them into the pins. It's like the show Price is Right.
Plinko.
It's like that, basically. So you're sitting at this machine, and you're trying to get the balls to fall into the jackpot, so you win more ball bearings. And so you go there and you sit. There's people sitting there with just like these buckets of. They look kind of like, they're kind of shaped like like the things you hold ammunition in.
Yeah.
Like World War II movies, those like 10 things. So
right.
Plastic full of these ball bearings. So there'll be like somebody sitting there with like 10 of them stacked up next to them. And you take those out because you can't win money, and you take it and you exchange it for a prize, like say a teddy bear. And then you go outside around the corner, and there's this little window thing that's connected to the building, but it's separate, and you exchange your teddy bear for cash. So that's how they kind of get around the laws there. But so that's kind of a history of the pachinko. But to answer the question, I played it like twice, just to kind of, you got to check it out type thing. But it's really, you go in there, it's just like everybody's chain smoking. It's loud, it's hideous. But
it's like Greektown Casino.
Yeah. But actually, you can find used machines there at kind of like secondhand stores. And actually, I had a good buddy who was an expat there, and he bought one while I was there, and he brought it back to the U.S. So that's his little memento of Japan. He has it set up in, I think, one of his rooms. So he goes in there and plays pachinko from time to time.
That's awesome. We got questions all over the place here, and I want to get to all of them, but I also want to hear, so you were in Japan, you were doing the DSP thing, you were having some success with that. You're there 13 years doing that, which is, I mean, a career in and of itself. And then you decide to make the jump back to the States, and you came into, well, how did you get, what was the job that took you back over to the US?
Yep. So as I said earlier, I just kind of, decided to up and quit one day. And so I obviously didn't leave that day, but I gave my notice. And as you know, when you're looking for new roles, if you're international, they don't want to consider you, right? So it's kind of easier when your boots on the ground. So I actually came back to the United States by myself, left my wife, and I think my son was about 1 at the time there. And I came back and I looked for new roles. And, that was very interesting because I hadn't been in the job market for a long time, and looking for a job and, polishing up your resume and the interview questions, which I always find are a little bit awkward to begin with. Where do you see yourself in 5 years and all this stuff? And I'm very easy to talk to people and, chat, but, those sort of things are a little bit odd to me. So I really had to get in the mind frame of a job seeker and, what are the interviews.
For a guy, Will, for just to tell you this, just give you some feedback and observation. For a guy that finds interview questions awkward, you're doing a great job. I just want you to know.
Well, thank you. So I really had to reprogram my brain and kind of rethink of put my brain on the side of not as a job seeker, but as the person looking to fill the role. And then my trick that I had to work on was I had all this great experience that was different, but connected to the role I wanted on the corporate side. So I had to obviously focus my resume on that to, basically find the job that I'm looking for, not the jobs that I had. So that's a trick in itself, is you got to get your resume on point. And I think all of it, English, grammar, punctuation is not my forte. And, I thought my resume was pretty good, but you can always use a professional resume company. For those that are looking for jobs or they've been laid off or whatever, if you've never used a professional resume writing company, plug for those people. It might cost you $100 or two, but it is well worth the money. The results you will have is phenomenal. So that's one of the tricks I learned along the way. And really, I came back. I based myself out of Kansas City, Missouri, where I have family, and I could stay for free because I'm cheap. As I looked, and really my outlook was the whole U.S. really, with the two coasts kind of out of the equation. I didn't want to go to New York or California that extreme, but somewhere in the Midwest or the South was what I was looking for on the corporate mobility role. And so I got a offer in, of all places, tropical Toledo, Ohio.
AKA South Detroit.
Yep. So I went there, and it's kind of funny, when I was going for the interview process, I did the typical phone interviews. And when it came time to book my flight to go there for the interview, they said, okay, we're going to book a flight to you to Detroit. I'm just like, well, that's great, but I'm going to Toledo. I had no idea really that close together. And so on that trip, I learned how horrible the roads are in Michigan to Ohio. So that road there had been under construction, probably still under construction for
every summer. We call it orange cone season here in the spring.
Yep. I always joke and say there's 2 seasons in Michigan. Road construction.
Our governor literally won on the platform, fix the damn roads. That's what she ran on.
Yeah, we'll see it when it happens.
Right, exactly.
So I was offered a corporate role in Toledo, Ohio, and so I moved there, and then my family essentially kind of joined me. They were commuting back and forth because my wife did not have immigration status to live in the U.S. So one would think you're a U.S. citizen, you have a child that's a U.S. citizen, that you could get your spouse over pretty easily. Not at all. The spousal green card process from start to finish takes about a year if you do everything correctly, and then now it would probably take a little bit longer. So basically, her and my son were commuting back and forth. I think my son went back and forth to Japan 8 times, and he's age 6 now.
I can't imagine a transatlantic flight with a toddler. Can't imagine.
Yeah, they're pretty good though. They're used to it.
Wow.
But so we got to Ohio.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a very good opportunity. And this is where things maybe didn't work out for the better and best initially, but down the road they did. I got into a really I found myself in a bad situation there. So basically, I got hired by a nightmare of a boss, and I found out quickly that several people before me were in the role and left, and it was just this really toxic situation. And that's not to say anything wrong with the company, just every company could have a pocket or a bad manager. And there was a situation that was just extremely wrong there. And I found that out very quickly. And I networked and I knew other people that had worked there in the role. And I was like, okay, I know how this is going to play out. And so, as I was with the company for 13 years before, it's not my style to just work for a company for a year and then move on. But it was really a bad situation. And so I started looking around, and I got a really good job opportunity that took me to Michigan with GM Financial. So what I guess the moral of the story is, how bad you think things are or how bad the situation is, it really led me to a great position. And it got us to a place where we had tons of friends. We had the Japanese community. So what was a nightmare was actually a blessing in disguise.
Sometimes that stepping stone is covered in crap, but it's still a stepping stone, And so I've been in the same type of situation before. We worked for a guy for a year and eight months. It was just the fact that I know it was a year and 8 months tells you how bad the situation was. You always know exactly how long you work for that kind of a boss. We got some other questions coming in here, which are really some good ones here. Hosea says, hello, Mr. Keating. Okay, so this is a serious question. From an international mobility perspective, how do you see the industry after COVID-19?
Yeah, I think it's gonna, take a while to recover and things get back to normal. But I think from our program perspective, other than people, we had people in China that wanted to get away. We had a bunch of people that decided to stay there because getting on the airplane is more dangerous than just staying put. But our program really hasn't changed all that much, right? We still have people going out on assignments where they can. We have a bunch of assignments that they want to start, but they need to wait for immigration to open up again, that sort of thing. So I think it will get back to somewhat normal eventually, and eventually they'll find a cure for it, and that will help. But we've seen this other times with SARS and Ebola and things like this. That this time is the only time where it's really been a worldwide pandemic. Right. But things will get better at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, SARS and Ebola. I mean, we look at Ebola, we're like, oh, that's an Africa problem. Look at SARS, oh, that's an Asia problem. We don't really think about, those didn't really hit our shores like this did. It didn't hit home quite literally, right? Yeah. Sandra, is it Sandra Clary again? Love his daughter peeking out. Let's see here. I think it was your son, probably. Let's see here. Jamie Master, what is the biggest difference in working in Japan versus U.S.? Cultural, logistics, relationships, hierarchy. Biggest difference working in Japan versus the U.S., Will?
Well, I guess if other people have dealt with Japan, or even I'd say that the closest to working with the Japanese is probably working with the Germans. Just very process-oriented, detail-oriented, over-engineered to the umpteenth degree. From a U.S. perspective is, okay, you have step 1 to 5. I'll do step 1. I'll skip 2 and 3. I'll fudge 4, and we'll get to the outcome. The outcome is important.
I think you just described my program and how it works.
Yeah. And so the outcome is important from a U.S. perspective, but in Japan, you have to follow the rule to the T until you can move on, or if it is just not going to it's just not going to happen. And I can share an analogy, an experience that I had in Japan. And so at my office, I had this little Italian joint around the corner. I'd go to at least once a week for lunch. And their deal was every day, they had a list of 10 pizzas, 10 pastas that put little stickers next to two of them. And you can choose of those ones which one you want for the lunch special. Ben knows I don't eat any seafood, nothing from an ocean, nothing from a river, a swimming pool. If it swims, I don't eat it. So that was motivation to learn the language. But so I'd go to this restaurant, and there was this lady. She was actually half Mexican, half Japanese. She even spoke some English. And whenever I'd go in there, I would say, okay, well, the special is this and this. And it always had seafood on it. But I would always negotiate with her and say, hey, can I just get a cheese pizza? And she's always like, cool, fine. And I'd get that. And then one day, this nice lady wasn't there. She was gone. There's this new lady taking the orders. And she comes, and I just said, hey, I'll take the lunch special cheese pizza. And she's like, you can't do that. And then I was like, why not? And she's like, well, because the lunch specials are these two pizzas, and you can have those, but you can't deviate. And it was something like octopus and broccoli or something on it there.
Right.
And then the other one had some sort of seafood combo. And she's like, can't do that. And I'm like, well, I'm basically getting that pizza just without the toppings. I'm actually saving you money.
Right.
Which doesn't go over well there. And she's like, oh, you can't do that because the pizzas don't have sauce. And I'm like, they don't have sauce, and they couldn't be a pizza. And then she's like, let me go check with the pizza chef. And she goes, and she comes back and says, oh yeah, they do have sauce. I'm like, great, can I get cheese pizza? No. And then a light bulb went off, like one right behind me here. And I was like, okay, I'll take the squid and broccoli pizza with no squid and no broccoli. She's like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
I told her in Japanese, I'm like, do you realize I just ordered a cheese pizza? But that's really, it goes to like the mindset there of just like, you got to kind of follow the rule blindly. And, I think, as a international person or foreign person being there, I can never get them to change the rule, but you just have to be smart about it. You have to know the culture, you have to know the differences, and you have to try to work to the rules as best as you can. So I'd say that's one major difference. Not good or bad, it's just different. One I can say that is definitely positive is the mindset of the people. For the most part, like, the people just work like crazy to the crazy detail. They're very dedicated. Like if you can get better service at a McDonald's in Japan than you could get like a 5-star restaurant in the U.S. Just people really care about what they do, the presentation, et cetera. So I'd say that's something that's very different, but also a very positive one as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that with the Japanese movers are just insane. They're just so thorough. Lynn Greenberg, what are your biggest concerns for the mobility space post-pandemic?
Well, I think if we're talking about a lot of the people on the groups here, if we represent the corporate and the service provider side, how it's going to impact the industry, right? Because this is going to have a huge impact on ERC, every other regional conference. People aren't doing conferences anymore. And how is that going to affect the overall industry? And I think that's going to affect obviously the service provider side, and that's how you meet people and you get sales and you make relationships, et cetera. So that's definitely going to impact things. And I think Ben, you could probably speak to that. You're probably feeling some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think conferences are definitely up in the air right now. I had conversations with ERC, and they're talking about, do we do a hybrid model? Do we do a virtual model? We just came off of virtual ERC, so I wonder how people feel about that. And lots of conferences coming up. So, I mean, from a business development standpoint, networking standpoint, and even from some of those corporate roundtable and benchmarking things that people do on the corporate side that they really get a lot of value out of. I think we're going to look at the way information is distributed and the way that networking occurs. I think things like this are going to become more important than they already are. And people are going to get more and more comfortable with stuff like this too, which, let's be honest, this is still kind of weird. But I think it's going to get more and more normal. But that's cool. Just adopt it, roll with it.
Yeah, it's definitely forcing us out of the box. I think I'm not one just to call or like FaceTime friends or family members. But I guess out of
noticed, Will. I'm just
kidding. I never called you, man. But I guess out of boredom, I've actually started doing that more. Like my friends in California or Japan or my Kansas City, and like I would just never call anybody on the phone or FaceTime. And here I am on the weekend, just FaceTiming people at random. Going back to the poker topic, we actually have a virtual poker party going. That again, it's my Japan crew that we've found an app that we can all log into. We all go into Zoom and we do a virtual poker party, just like people are doing virtual happy hours. So there's a lot of technology out there that we can kind of change, and it's not say for the worst, but it's different. We have to adapt.
All right, two questions here. One real quick from Mena. It looks like that you were having a long journey in your career. When was your most difficult time? How did you overcome it?
And we spoke to this a little bit. So there was kind of 2 points. So one, when I just decided that I wanted to leave the service industry and essentially quit my job and figure it out with a small child and a wife and no income. So I think that was a leap of faith. But going back to you want to be happy, right? And so that was a difficult time, and kind of pounding the pavement looking for a job where you don't have a job is always the most stressful, and you doubt yourself, but you just got to chug at it. And basically every day I was waking up. I wasn't like sleeping in until like noon and kind of waking up, sending a resume. I was like waking up every morning and doing my exercise, making connections on LinkedIn, calling people, making contacts, applying for jobs, doing everything that I could. So difficult, but I learned a lot during that period. So again, strength through adversity. And then the other time was I was just in that tough spot when I was in tropical Toledo, Ohio, which is a nightmare of a boss. Again, when I look back at now, it was a great thing that happened because it led me to where I am now. And I think also being in that situation, it made me a better manager and team leader. And kind of being in that situation, I reflected back on the days when I was in Japan, and I had kind of hindsight's 20/20, and you look and reflect on things. But it definitely made me a better person going forward.
Question here from Robert. Did you find the process-oriented style of the Japanese to clash with the task-oriented style of others in the workplace?
Yeah, we did see that in the office quite a bit because, like I said, we had a majority Japanese staff and then a percentage of international folks. So there was a clash sometimes on that. But it's really I don't know if there's ways to avoid it. Just when you have different cultures like that, that happens. But I always tried to reinforce to everybody that we need to focus on the outcome. So we have somebody moving from Tennessee to Nagoya, Japan, and our goal is to get that person there, as smooth and seamlessly as possible. It might look very ugly in the background, all the things going on and the madness, but we're focused 100% on the customer and their experience. And so we really use that to rally kind of our team, because I think going back to the Japanese personality, they essentially want to do a good job and have great customer service. And then from the international perspective, we could, help to make things happen. So that actually added a good contrast and balance.
Last question's from my dad, actually. I have to ask my dad's question. Dan Cross says, where are Japanese relocating to internationally?
Actually, funny, before you told me that it pops up on my screen, before you tell me it was your dad, I was going to did you pay your dad to ask him? I know the answer to that one. So, I guess I can't speak to everybody or everybody's moving, but I just speak to the experience that I know. So as I spoke, I lived in Nagoya, Japan, and that was the epicenter of automotive. That's where Toyota's headquartered, and aerospace and defense. That's where Mitsubishi Heavy Industries is headquartered. So they do a lot of project with like Boeing and Lockheed Martin and former UTC or our former UTC parent company, Pratt and Whitney, all those type of companies. So I know for those groups, a lot of the Japanese automotive industries, they're heavily invested in Asia, and of course everybody's in China. But Toyota, for example, they're very heavily invested in Thailand. They do a lot of manufacturing there. Vietnam, they had like a technical center there that a lot of the tech work was coming out of there. So I've seen a lot of people all over Asia with Japanese. In the U.S., I think the larger populations are the Los Angeles area historically, because you had the wave of farming immigrants 100 years ago or whatever, and then that's where Toyota was on the West Coast. So historically, there's been a big influx of Japanese there. Northern California, Silicon Valley, obviously there's a lot of companies there. Elsewhere in the U.S., Texas, Seattle with Boeing, there's a lot of Japanese there. Chicago, I don't really know what industry. New York with all the banks, et cetera. And then also in Michigan, very large population there. And then you can imagine just about anywhere else. I imagine in Europe, the car companies I know, like in Belgium and stuff, they have European headquarters there. So I can imagine there's quite a few Japanese folks there as well. Also from a legacy standpoint, believe it or not, there are a lot of Japanese in Latin America. There's a huge population in Brazil. I was surprised when I was in Japan. I was like, why are there so many Brazilians here? And they were Asian looking, basically Japanese ancestry, Brazilians. And I think they just celebrated about 100 years of open immigration and stuff. And so there's a huge population there, Argentina, Peru, et cetera. So just like everybody else, it's a global world now. Everybody's moving everywhere.
Love it. Jane Wilson says, having a bad manager teaches you what not to do when you are in a managerial role. I agree. Sometimes, though, it also imprints on you, unfortunately, just like having a bad parent might. And you just learn that lesson, unfortunately, or how to do it that way. Sandra Corona, her name didn't pop up here, but she wrote a question. What is the one skill you brought back with you from Japan that has helped you succeed in your business every time you apply it?
That would really just go back to my experience there. So, we kind of started talking about part of the story about the DSP and kind of how that started, but, really starting it from ground zero, building a client base, getting people to believe in you and, building the services. And so I've worked like very in the weeds with a lot of areas that many of us on the call today that we work with. So I worked, very closely with real estate, obtaining a real estate license, doing home viewing tours, et cetera. Started a, furniture lease business. So how the importing and the purchasing and, the leasing of that works. Developing relocation services that we sold to customers, from scratch. Developing cultural training programs, for the market, delivering those. So I think that variety of experience and background has really helped me a lot in my world today.
There's not many, but there are some global mobility managers who work for companies who have entrepreneurial aspects to them. And it's so refreshing to talk to them. And you're one of those people. Kerwin Guillermo is also one of those people at HP. There's people that run their global mobility program like a business. And I think it's such a different perspective. And it's kind of an art of the possible exercise. Ann Knapp says, gosh, the comments just keep on coming. Ann Knapp says, Jane Wilson, 100% agree with that. I've learned a lot of how not to's from them. Ann, would you care to name names? That'd be great. Sandra Corona says, thank you for the answer. All right. Before we get any more questions here, Janet, let's go to our sponsors and thank them real quick before we say goodbye to Will. VIP Corporate Housing is the partner you can trust to put the safety and security of your employees front and center in everything you do. In addition to providing some of the best accommodations in top location, they've added extra cleaning measures and precautions to put your minds at ease so you can leave the worrying to them and you can focus on doing your best work. Thanks, Brad and the team at VIP Corporate Housing for donating to Move for Hunger and being a sponsor today. Will, this has been great. You've been super gracious with your time. We did go over a little bit. We had a whole bunch of people watching on LinkedIn and on Facebook and YouTube. Let me ask you, Will, is there anything that you'd like to leave our viewers with today?
Well, I just want to say to you, Ben, thanks for having me. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to catch up with you and the rest of the mobility community. I love what you're doing here. Like you said, the entrepreneurial spirit is definitely showing in what you're doing. I love the title of the show, Love and Relo. I think mobility, relo is just a weird, quirky niche role that we all love, and it shows in what we do. And so really just a thank you for what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Will. It's good to see you, buddy. Say hi to the fam for me, and I wish you all the best in Florida, and hopefully we see each other soon post-COVID, man.
Yep, I would love the opportunity to take your money at poker again.
Yeah, okay. Maybe. You kind of did. You might have taken it once or twice. I'm not going to lie. Take care, everybody. See you tomorrow.